Despite their amiable TV personas, the Golden Girls were anything but in real life. By making advances toward individuals in the audience, Betty enraged B. Estelle Getty was so nervous that she completely blanked on her next words. Following her early Emmy acceptance, B became so enraged that she cut off all communication with Betty. In her description of Betty, B used a derogatory term, and the casting director overheard her. What you discover about these TV grandmas will shock you. The histories of the four Golden Girls must be discussed first. As soon as Betty White graduated from high school, she began working in radio. Her life took a dramatic turn in 1949 when she became a part of a brand new live TV show, Hollywood on Television. It was airing nonstop on KAC-TV in Los Angeles for 5 hours each day. Unlike anything else on television, it was a lot of hard work. Betty and a man named Al Jarvis were co-hosts in the past. She briefly co-starred with Eddie Albert after his departure in 1951. However, Betty quickly became the showrunner on her own. In her time, no woman had ever hosted a talk show solo until her. For hours on end, she would address the camera directly, concocting imaginary tales, jokes, acts, and eventually guests. Betty may have been the first female television host, according to some. While still a high school student, in 1939 she performed a test show rendition of the Merry Widow songs. It was in the pre-television era. It was completely novel when Betty accomplished it in 1952. At the tender age of 28, while still residing with her parents, she contributed to the establishment of a television production company. Bandit, her dog, was the inspiration for the name of her production company, Bandandy. It all started with her, George Tibbles, and Don Fedderson. Historically, males presided over the majority of television shows. In the United States, Betty was among the first female co-owners of a film studio. She had complete control over everything that went down, on screen and off. They embarked on their first major undertaking, Life with Elizabeth. As a full-fledged sitcom, it aired nationwide from 1953 to 1955. A brief sketch from her talk show was where it all started. Not only did Betty star in it, but she also wrote it. The show was a 1952 Emmy winner in her home state, and she was the winner. History was altered by it. In her own show, she broke a glass ceiling by being the first female writer and star. Having Betty on game shows was also a hit with many. In the 60s and 70s, she had a reputation for being both intelligent and timing sensitive. Never in her entire career had she hosted Password. Even though her husband Alan Ludden did, she was a frequent visitor and cherished friend. And in 1983, she disregarded still another regulation. The Outstanding Game Show Host Daytime Emmy was first presented to a woman, Betty. As host of Just Men on NBC, she took home the trophy. She became famous in the US after appearing on game shows. They were instrumental in shaping her into the kind of approachable and humorous actress who became a TV favorite. A very rare feat in television, Betty had won 7 Emmys over many decades by the end of her life. In 1973, Betty's career took a drastic turn when she landed a special part. In The Lars Affair, an episode of The Mary Tyler Moore Show, she portrayed Sue Ann Nibbins. Sue Ann was a flirtatious TV housewife who, when alone, could be as sharp as a knife. It wasn't her role to play that role. Because the casting call simply stated Betty White type, the producers went ahead and cast the actual Betty White. Despite her early closeness to Mary Tyler Moore, Betty eventually nailed the role. People really liked Sue Ann, even though she was only supposed to make a one-time appearance. While she was a part of the show, she went on to win consecutive Emmys in 1975 and 1976. Due to how excellent it was, she nearly brought it with her to her next major role. It was on The Golden Girls that Betty originally landed the role of the feisty Blanche. Broadway star Bea Arthur was well known before her role as Dorothy Zbornak. In 1966, she co-starred with Angela Lansbury as Vera Charles in the television series Mame. She won the Tony for Best Featured Actress despite her desire for the lead role. In 1964, she appeared as Yente the Matchmaker in Fiddler on the Roof and Threepenny Opera. She and director Jerome Robbins got into an argument during that performance. Afterwards, she claimed he was the one and only person who had ever brought tears to her eyes. Her first television role was in 1971 when Norman Lear cast her as Maude Findlay on an episode of All in the Family. She had her own show, Maude, on CBS from 1972 to 1978 due to her widespread popularity. She had already achieved stardom as a female TV personality before 1985's The Golden Girls even aired. It was 1977 when she received an Emmy. Rue McClanahan began her career in New York City theater in 1957. When she arrived, after waiting over a decade, she made her Broadway debut in 1968 opposite Dustin Hoffman in Jimmy Shine. The show resulted in 161 performances and television roles. Caroline Johnson, a deranged housekeeper, was her role in the soap opera Another World. Her role as Margaret Jordan was in Where the Heart Is. Her comedic talents were on full display when she became Maude's friend Vivian Harmon, playing Bea Arthur. The two actors met on that show, which paved the way for their collaboration on The Golden Girls. In 1987, Rue won an Emmy for her portrayal of the sassy Southern belle Blanche Devereaux. She finally achieved success in the theater industry after decades of dedicated work. Similarly, Estelle Getty had a considerably lengthier road to stardom. After 40 years of trying, she finally broke through when she was 62 years old. Sophia Petrillo, Dorothy's spirited mother, was portrayed by her. There was over a year between her and Bea Arthur's actual ages. Both of her auditions for the role of an 80-year-old woman on The Golden Girls were unsuccessful because the casting directors felt she was too youthful. On her third attempt, she pleaded with the makeup artist to give her an older look while wearing her old clothes. Said she to him, "This is just a job to you, but I view it as the end of my career unless you can make me look 80. Her dogged persistence paid off. The Torch Song trilogy was being filmed in Los Angeles during her employment there. Prior to this, she supported her family by working as an office worker and had only minor film roles, such as a cameo in Tootsie. Her hilarious timing and lines like "Your life's an open blouse to Blanche" won her many fans in the role of Sophia. Even though Getty was only supposed to play a supporting role in Sophia, she ended up becoming a fan favorite and even won an Emmy in 1988. In the autumn of 1984, something amusing happened during an NBC advertising program. Remington Steele's Doris Roberts and Night Court's Selma Diamond were performing a play. "Miami" was one of Diamond's joke phrases, very well done. "I bet it's about some retirees playing pinochle in a living room. Everyone found this hilarious. It was all in good fun." However, Warren Littlefield, who was present in the room, noticed more. He toyed with the idea of a comedy series starring elderly women while serving as NBC's Senior Vice President of Comedy Development. What followed that careless remark caught everyone off guard. Instead of sitting around and waiting for writers to pitch him stories, Littlefield took matters into his own hands and wrote them himself. Susan Harris, a writer, was his first stop, and he shared the idea with her. While Harris was interested, the majority of TV shows do not feature central female characters who are older. Novelist Matt Baume would go on to describe it as one of the luckiest accidents in the history of TV. The Golden Girls, an Emmy-winning and 68-nominated comedy, was born out of that practical joke. There was a significant change in the initial plan to cast. Betty White was cast as the carefree Southern woman Blanche, while Rue McClanahan was cast as the innocent and lovely Rose. White had portrayed a character with comparable traits on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and McClanahan had portrayed the cheerful Vivian to Maude, so it all made sense. However, B. Arthur was not happy about it. When McClanahan contacted to inform her about the idea, Arthur informed Rouet, "I don't want to do Maud and Vivian meet Sue Ann Nivens. Not interesting enough." A wise decision by the show's director, Jay Sandrich, altered the course of events. During the auditions, he requested that McClanahan read for Blanche rather than Rose. Afterwards, he had White do Rose's reading. Following the activation of that switch, everything shifted. The new plan appealed to Arthur, so he went ahead and joined. Roles were switched at the last minute, which made the show famous. Two unforgettable characters were created when the actresses left behind roles that had become ingrained in their careers. Even Sophia's on-screen counterpart had a backstory. Despite playing the lead role, Getty was much younger than White and Arthur. She looked the part with her daily 45-minute makeup routine. However, she was unable to transform into Sophia by simply applying makeup. She went shopping in the Fairfax neighborhood of Los Angeles in search of unique items to impress her interviewer. Afterwards, she uncovered a little wooden sack. Because it was so cute, she decided to add it to Sophia's ensemble. It was so well known that the apparel division had to make a backup in case anyone misplaced the original. In an interview with B. Arthur, who co-starred with Betty White on The Golden Girls in 2011, the actress discussed the highs and lows of her career. For years, fans had been curious about this. Betty revealed, "She wasn't that fond of me." Nearly 2 decades after the show ended, on occasion, she thought I was a real pain in the neck. B didn't like Betty's constant happiness, according to Betty. "If I were happy, she would be furious," she quipped while laughing. Some viewers were taken aback because they had assumed that the movie had depicted Rose and Dorothy as mere friends. Despite the tense situation, they maintained their composure. They both received Emmys for their roles on the show, and they didn't let it affect their performance. The plot shifted once more. Joel Thurm made a shocking statement in a 2023 tell-all book. Thurm was a casting director at NBC during the Golden Girls era. According to him, he overheard B. Arthur describing Betty White using a derogatory and hurtful term. According to later accounts, Blanche's on-screen counterpart, Rue McClanahan, merely referred to Betty as a bit of a handful. According to Thurm, the discord stemmed from the women's contrasting acting styles. B was serious and required time to prepare for her role as an actress with theater training. In contrast, Betty favored a more relaxed and unstructured approach. She had a different approach to rehearsal than B, and she preferred to address the crowd in between scenes, something B despised. Matthew Sachs, B's son, had a new perspective after all these years. In an interview, he stated that his mom had no ill will toward Betty. She simply handled her in an awkward manner. "It was fun to have someone to be annoyed with," said he. He compared it to the idea that everyone needs an annoying neighbor. It was Betty who was that neighbor for B. Notwithstanding the challenges they faced together, Matthew made it plain that his mom liked Betty in her own special way. During the show's early seasons, she even rode shotgun with her. The crux of the matter was a significant variation in people's work styles. From Broadway, where B originated, you had to maintain character and focus intently between takes. Game shows and live television hosted her in the past. She would normally join in the crowd's laughter, flirt with them, and maintain a lighthearted attitude. Betty would occasionally lift her skirt during breaks and joke with fans, according to Jim Colucci, who wrote a book about the show. The way people behaved irritated B. She gave her all to each performance and remained faithful to her script until the very end. There were early indications of tension among the Golden Girls when they appeared at the 1986 Emmys. Each of the 4 ladies had a Best Lead Actress in a Comedy Series nomination. As a result, Betty White was named the winner. The victory was disappointing to B. Arthur. According to Rue McClanahan's autobiography, B became extremely furious and yelled at Betty behind closed doors. From the beginning, Bea saw herself as the serious, stage-trained actress. She remembered Betty from her time in Password and didn't think much of her, seeing her instead as a game show host. Ruja in 1987 and Bea and Estelle Getty in 1988 were the four of them who ultimately won Emmys, but there are those who believe that Betty's early victory created a rift that never completely healed. Their actions failed to ameliorate the situation. Almost immediately, Betty would memorize her lines and occasionally incorporate writers' loved jokes. She brought a joyful, carefree vibe to the set by chatting with the live audience in between scenes. Conversely, Bea withheld her writing until the very end. She frequently went backstage to calm herself between takes so that she could remain in character. Her son clarified that Mom simply didn't think those breaks were appropriate for mingling. Betty was able to do it without looking up, but Bea found it annoying and distracting. As the show progressed, Bea's anger grew steadily worse. She had had enough of the jokes involving Dorothy by the time the 7th season rolled around. The jokes about Dorothy's love life, Rose's stupidity, Blanche's romantic life, and Sophia's age were more impersonal and less personal. They made fun of her height, voice, and appearance. Bea believed that Dorothy wasn't the only one making fun of her. Furthermore, she inquired as to why the writers insisted on making Dorothy appear strange or unattractive. Despite the show's continued fame, she decided to leave in part because she was furious with the producers. Debbie Reynolds was even considered appearing on a test show by NBC, but Bea chose to stay for one more season before finally departing. On set, there was a subtle melancholy as Estelle Getty struggled with her lines. Although Estelle played Sophia, Dorothy's mother, she was younger than Bea. Her habit of forgetting her lines became apparent around the 3rd season. The strain was mild at first, but soon became unbearable. Reportedly, Betty teased Estelle about her tendency to forget things when they were around the actual people. Attempts by Betty to divert attention away from Estelle and her recovery by making people laugh have been interpreted by some as acts of kindness. Estelle transitioned from using props to cue cards after writing her lines on the former. Betty White and Rue McClanahan became true friends and remained so throughout the 7 years that the Golden Girls aired, even though not all of the cast members got along. They used to play word games every day while they were in between takes, which they both really enjoyed. As Rue famously put it, behind the scenes is where the real action is. As a diversion from shooting, they would create small puzzles for one another to solve. They would trade puzzles once they finished working.